Fine.
Hi,
Happy Yom Yerushalayim.
likewise. Where's your white shirt?
That's for tomorrow.
Okay. Sure.
Thank you for the reminder.
Okay, so I think the text up to goes start with the paragraph starts with Dalid. What page is that?
Reish Aleph.
Reish off. Okay, thank you. ובכל שני אילן שנין, ממסר הבא have Rav Ashi Gaon Masa Mechasya. Okay, really? We're up to I guess up to the sixth generation, yeah. Um the let's see what he says here. Min besar apah mishnah stafrei pei beis gaon kol rosh yeshiva afilu min aroi miskagom and Masa Mechasya. So he says here in the brackets in the for Burim on page Reish Aleph is year after year 371. Okay, Gaon, and the screen text says, "Oh, just call them a Gaon," but Benowitz is not happy with this. He's not happy with calling it Gaon. He's not happy with this anachronistic usage. Okay, but in any event, he was a Gaon Masa Mechasya, which he says here is in the both say I'm going to say is adjacent to Sura. So this was, in essence, the yeshiva of Sura. Evidently, they didn't have, like buildings like the big yeshivas do nowadays. It seems like they were going from place to place in the town. So it was kind of like in Eastern Europe until Volozhin.
Mhm.
There were no big yeshiva buildings, right? It was in a shul. It was in a shul here, a shul there. They went to different shuls.
No, but
So,
at some point, Volozhin itself had a big building.
what?
At some point, Volozhin
No,
itself had a
Volozhin
big
itself
building.
was the big building, yes. But I think it was the first yeshiva to have a designated building. Think that one of its innovations was his first yeshiva to have a designated building. Um, so the Sacha Beknish the Bay Rav Ubaniak, the Reno Shutfim. He destroyed the shul of the base of the Bay Rav, the base Medrash, which was and he rebuilt it. This is a shul. It's not. I don't think it was actually the a real base Medrash, as he points out in the and Rabbi Rabinowitz points out, basically, it's the Shira, but their cloud, he translates actually not Beiknish Beirav. He has the Beiknish, he says it was the their cloud, well, let me just read it, sorry. The Per Shabiti Beirav Batam, normally when it says Beirav, Natam, base Medrash, Shetamidim Shadain Kukim Larav. So he says, as soon as to require Rebbe. Yeshim Shgam Khan, Gzua Kavana. Ain't Kesh Bitui Zeh, in Talmidi base Medrash, or base Agnesh Mora Rav. No, it's nothing to do with the Talmidim of the base medrash of Masa Mechasya, or sure, it has to do with the Amora Rav. Actually, yesh mikrim Talmud shebei Rav koshur b'Rav Amora. So, chen yesh there for those who say shakavana kan lebniya chozer shebeis medrash or beis agneset shel Rav shnigar b'oso shem, which is called the house of Rav. Abi shemikodem hayebesur v'atov arla Masa Mechasya. So he actually transferred its location.
Mhm.
Um, and it says in text in the screen text it says no. The such should know Rav Chisda b'shas stop page down the shos because of Rabbeinu Leil Perek Tezvav Char Ayin Cheshon Kshema Rav Ashi b'Tarpav Nizgalbo Stakim L'chein Tzotshov Nam Michadosh Chisda Bana is Bei Rav Kedam Rav Rabbeinu Leil Perek Tezvav Elokam Rabbeinu Rav Ashi Sotze Bana is Bei Rav El Sotze Bana Bei Knishta the Bei Rav Shman Rav Chisda Bana Kama Chadon Kama Lamas Tamid Chalkom La'achol Chalkom Lisha. Okay, he's making this up. He says that there are several rooms that you're to eat, some to sleep. He'll come to Modach, he'll come to spell, some to learn, and some to learn daven. Also, Cherem Yod Litfil be make Nishta Bei Rav Nisarv Nisoch Rav Ashi No Michadosh. Okay, I know where he gets all that from, but it was a whole complex, and it was built by Rav
Okay.
Chisda, not by Rav. It was for Bei Rav for the base medrash, and he destroyed the element which is used for davening. Let's see if that fits into the subsequent part of the text. It says he made several positive improvements to it. He says here in the foot on page Reish Beis. I guess he made some sort of drainage for it. And Babasa, it's mentioned there because it was the roof was leaking, so he fixed it and put some drains in. Okay. V'kava raglei v'tanisa lo avir el Reishei Galusa kavaslo v'nardo, and he made evidently assembly points, assembly times a year for regalim and for tanios. So it says here on the bottom, chutzim yarchei kalo davu chodesh b'kayitz chodesh b'chorev oynogim lasos weekly kama shavua shlemi poskim lachton. For an entire week they would stop working. Wisconsin basically has to come to the shul. V'shom misham droshes b'chachamim. Uve'er v'yochim shulchanim v'msiba gedola. They would make a big fire bringing at night. Mashir v'zemer with the songs. Yom Rishon Shachar Shabbos ahi, and first Sunday after that Shabbos, so you osi tanis. They make a tanis after they finish that big party. Ulaichot to be a man mishta. So he says probably the tanisa goes together, which he seems to be making this up.
Okay.
Okay. We'll see Kesler Basmei Yeshivos. Conference Rabbeinu Shoyos of Bashua Pashas Lech Lecha. Michil Loinokim Bar Ragla Tanisa. They didn't do this initially. Mishpachas Rosh Gula Pumpatisa, B'nei Nardo. Shanim Shein Shos Fin Kesler B'nei Yeshiva Pumpatisa B'nardo. So the Rav Ashi Gen Shegu Rigli Tanisa Af Sura. Okay. If you look at the printed text, he doesn't say anything about this. It says, "Lo tiknu afil regalim d'Rabbanan achrei churban bayis hamikdash." They're no Churban Beis Hamikdash, never pilgrimages. So what does he mean? Can't be this mentioned the regular Rosh Goyim nation maskil sorak acharkach. It's going to mention later on. So it's a very big discrepancy in the pshat, right? He's saying they made a big celebration of the Shol Golim. Bishtarfus Komani Yedus Bavel. And all the people of the Babylonian Jewry come participate. Because we're going to Hainu Shabbos of the Rigla. It's a Shabbos of Yontif. I'm Izgeres of Talmud. The Mikshua Barosh HaGoyla, and they used to all go to the Rosh HaGoyla. B'Shabbos of the Rigla is Kama Sifa Pumbisha B'Rabbanim V'Manikim B'Reis B'Reish HaGoyla. And the Shabbos of the Rigla, they used to have the great public ceremony of the rabbis and leaders in the house of Reish HaGoyla. Hamonim HaChokim Amdu B'Chutz. I guess the masses stand outside. But Shabbos Chol HaMoed. So very, very different than the screen text, which says it's a special week. Pashas Lech Lecha says for some reason. Here it's about An Yom Tov itself, right? V'Tanios. Imis Kamein B'Shir Gon L'Kviyas Tanis Tzibur. Ke'el Muskos Prepare B'Sechos Tanis. The Perek Tav says the Talmud. Homesh Lo goes to Tanis Tzibur Bavel. There is no Tanis Tzibur in Bavel. Minesh Lo Yisrael Avchat Sam Chuslik Zor Tanis Tzibur. Nobody had authority to make a Tanis Tzibur. Fasibel is Zekin Rehu. Minesh Lo Yisrael Smicha, but Smicha is an Ejel Chutzorz because no Smicha is an Ejel Chutzorz. Mem Bear Matzia Pichuvas and Shirgon. Shwana Kol Tanios Lo Formalios. Not formal fast. Like Tanios shows fast, partial fast. Shwana Gamim Nei Chachamim Rabim. Achal Mufla Achal and many Chachamim even without Smicha make even one advanced Chacham. Tanios Gam Rosh Gola Ayam Mishatef. The Tarain ain't a tzos Bear Matimo, but you can develop Shirgon. He rejects it. Okay, I'm not sure why, but anyway. This whole thing that we have in this text over here, I don't know where he gets it from, but Rabbi Rabinowitz has grave difficulty with it, and I don't blame him because the Golim sounds like Regalim, and Taniel sounds like fast, and it doesn't sound like this week-long learning with great festivities and a fast afterwards in order to atone for the festivities.
Mhm.
Okay. Anyway, let's go further and see what he says. Initially, these only were done by the Reishei Galusa and Narda. V'shav l'riga the Reishei Galusa begava, and he put the regular Reishei Galusa in uh
Probably like Chauvet was the same as.
no, I think he put
No?
it. He placed it. Um, uh, in other words, he overtook it. It used to be in Nardo, and Rav Ashi said, "No, we're doing now Masa Mechasya." Um,
Mhm.
you see he put it in Masa. See in the bottom line on page Reish base in the text. He says, "B'Masa Mechasya." He made it in Masa Mechasya the regel Sherira Rosh Hashanah, which he says on Peri Reish Gimel was a time when they rendered their respect to the Reishei Galusa. What does he say? Let's see what wild shot he might have to say here. He says, "Dayin mishparos Rosh Hashanah v'bakshin larochsa reglei v'tanisa dilham pumbedisa shrigat ko v'asalem Rav Ashi lasos kein." He forbade them to do that. So he moved everything to Sura. And this they agree. What they moved, that's a separate question. But they moved something.
So now, how is it that Rav Ashi is telling the Reish Galusa what to do? I
Oh,
mean, what was the power
so as he
hierarchy?
says next line, he says, Hoil v'hava miflik nefisha taraso gdulaso. He was very powerful both in Torah and in wealth. Okay, that's how he translates gedula is wealth. That's how the Rabbinu translates it. He translates it that he doesn't really translate. He had some sort of power, undefined. But Rashi was very powerful, even more powerful than Reishei Galusa. Okay, so therefore he was able. Reishei Galusa
Okay.
could be this very weak Reishei Galusa. We have no idea, right? So therefore he
Right.
was subservient to Rav Ashi. And he says, "Vuda bar nasan davar Reishei Galusa." Yeah, he says perhaps Hunaras davar Reishei Galusa bani yoyme. Umrei mar martusha dava basrei all Rosh Galusa. Kulavik kaifili Rav Ashi. They're all subordinate to Rav Ashi. The Kashavin Lagleim but Masa Mechasya, so they made their regular Masa Mechasya. It could be because there are a few of them in quick succession. Maybe they didn't really establish themselves. Right?
Okay.
Then it says, "Gidin Amar Avacha Breda Rava Afanun Amar Mimos Rebbe Rav Ashi Lomatil Torah Gedula Makam Echad." So we then find Torah and Gedula, which means either wealth or political power, in one place. In other words, that it should be focused in one person. What about Huda Bar Nasa, who was Reishei Galusa? Shai Bar Nasa, the makeup of a Kai for Rav Ashi. He was subordinate to Rav Ashi. Okay. Um, so, okay. Became the kingdom of Rigley, the Reishei Galusa, Masa Mechasya. So since they made the Rigley, the regarding the Reishei Galusa in Masa Mechasya, Havu Tzricha Rashusa Pumbedisa Meza Tamam Shabbos Lech Lecha. So they had to go. The heads of the Pumbedisa had to go to Masa Mechasya Shabbos Lech Lecha. These Shabbos Davu Rigla the Reishei Galusa. This is where evidently his source, right?
Yeah.
That the regular Reishei Galusa wasn't Lech Lecha. Ikbu Ruba the Reishei Galusa made their awesome. And evidently, not only did they have to go there. Once they went there, they started living there.
Okay.
Um, does he say anything over here? Doesn't say anything about this Parshas Lechlecha. On page Reish Dali, don't see anything here.
Okay.
Let me just check. He doesn't want to say from the Nusach here. Reishei Galusa, then maybe there's more than one Reishei Galusa. I don't know why I have to say that. He kind of glosses over the Lech Lecha business. He says, though, in 59, in note 59, in 59, he says, it brings another Girsa, which is interesting. He says, they went with Shabbos Lakala, not Lech Lecha.
Okay.
So that would eliminate the Lech Lecha.
Okay.
But in the Targum, he does have the Girsa Lech Lecha. Okay, in any event, it's a cryptic thing. Um, I guess it's Parshas Lech Lecha because Lech Lecha, right? Trying to move, right? So therefore they said, okay, we're going to make some sort of event. That was like in America, they used to make all the conventions on Thanksgiving weekend. So this is the equivalence. It's Parshas Lech Lecha. Umamed Ovid Rav Ashi, what Rav Ashi said, Liberty was Sarkain. It's what Rav Ashi did was not negated afterwards. It says, "Vaydeshi kin Rav Ashi shu mishpachos Reish Galusa nogim asaril Masa Mechasya, Rav Ashi shalotis batel yeshiva so gam Sarkain klamar charmo so." So therefore, even after his death, yeshiva continued there. Shaydesh kofa lam erochsa regularly. Masa Mechasya, since he compelled them to become Masa Mechasya. It was hard to travel. Masa came to live in Masa Mechasya. I don't know, for 1 week a year they would come to live in Masa Mechasya. So it's a cool way of ensuring the fundraising. Because that way the Rosh Galusa were there, everybody would come there and be able to they all fundraise for Sura. It's not Pumbedisa anymore, right? Yeshiva started to meet always through history of the Amoraim, the yeshiva which always survived, yeshiva was Pumbedisa, where they used to be. Generation when the Gadol was in a different yeshiva, going B'Dorsha Ravuna, Shemish Rosh Yeshiva Masa Mechasya, but his Loi Butler Yeshiva was Pumbedisa. Nation Russia Galusa, you darn because the Russia Galusa would live there, but you dug him. So this battle, they made sure it wasn't negated. Avashai she was going to Masa Mechasya, because my sure Avuna Chakayim, Hoyz Yeshivas Chakayim, so the Yeshivas like Masa Mechasya. So Avuna slipped. She was intact. She makes Avuna Butler Shivaso. She was not a she was not a dog, because my sure Nachman Kayim, she was a Kayim, she makes Butler. But this was not the case. And this is the yeshiva of Ashi was not Batak. Rav Yehuda for Rabba Vabai for Rav Lavi and Alchada Mesifta Pumpadisa, and all the yeshivas were negated. So Rav Ashi have a Tarta Mesivasan. But after Rav Ashi, there were 2 yeshivas. In other words, even after Rav Ashi died, Sura remained, and evidently there was Pumpadisa was still extant.
Mhm.
The okay. V'hainu Damar Rav Ashi so Shabbos after the Masa Mechasya lo charpa. I made sure that Masa Mechasya was not going to be destroyed. V'chol shat b'shayt the Rav Reishei Galusa Masa Mechasya the cover Rigla Bei Rav. Okay, I guess before he moved there, right? They made his regular Bei Rav. Azik Hamei Rosh Hashanah Rabban Pumbedisa. The rabbis who remained Pumbedisa went to Masa Mechasya. V'achin Nagim Milson Adain. This is the custom Ad Shir Masan Shna Shim Asher till about 200 years ago. There's a long thing here. And on page Reishei, there's a long note here. Rav Shirgon Marchi Mobishi Sos Rav Ashi. Rav Shirgon spends a long time speaking about Rav Ashi's personality. Bichar Bavar's regular Rosh Hashanah Masa Mechasya, especially this transfer. Chen Sheish Stacey was the cock. Perhaps 2 reasons. Koko, Rav Shirgon Lagish, he wants to emphasize Delshia ben Kufas Rav Ashi with Kufa so. There's very big machlekes between the Rosh Hashanah and Rosh Hashanah and time of Sherira Gaon. He brings down the example of machlekes between Sabi Gaon and Reb Dad Metzaka, which I guess is going to come up later on. Fisa Muvani Maktoim Aboim B'Perek Shalonu. Because understand Shebaim Shirgon Sotemino say deviates. Don Biach Sheb and Rosh Hashanah Rabbanim B'Sof Tkuva Hasasanis. with the clear skuva Islamis. Hasiba Shni, the second was Rav Shimon Tzia Chomer Agdulas Rav Ashi, Rosh Sita, Yishurim Akfivus and Mukhlezet Shlosh Go Tachtov, the Romans could cover Yeshiva's Pumpadisa. He does? I thought we're in Sura now. Shalo Kibla Kayadua, Maspik Michal Kaspisi Mir Shira Gaon. What? He wants to uplift Pumpadisa, so he's stressing Pumpadisa, but Rav Ashi was in Sura. Masa Mechasya. I don't know what he's talking about. Maybe he's going to elaborate later on. Okay. Somehow this is good for Pumpadisa. Okay.
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused as to what's why, but let's keep going.
Vagniga Milsa Dain at Shir Masan Shim Hashto Havalon Reishei Galusa Marus Kashav Shultanusa Rabsa be made Parsim. So this was a case where till the 200 years since the Rosh Hashanah had a
Strong rulership,
but
and
now this is so. So what happened?
in the time of the Persians.
That's true, but so that's fine. But I thought they were just we were just about Rav Ashi. So how do we skip here? Why don't we skip back to Russia? We thought Reishei Galusa. I thought we just said the kafir to Rav Ashi. Now what happened? I guess what it means is that there's even though the Reishei Galusa moved to Sura, they still had a powerful authority, and therefore everybody else had to come to them.
Mhm.
They had no choice. So it says that they had powerful authority. Ushulnos have some great governance. He made parsim. Sassanids. It says here, Russia made and even the beginning of the Islamic period. Now I'm having Zavni. They Reish Galusa B'Dam Gedol. They purchase the office of Reish Galusa for a lot of money.
Mhm.
And they were among them who were very caused great anguish to the Rabbanim.
Mhm.
Um, and it says interestingly in the footnote in the notes on page Reish Vav, says it's possible that the fact that the Nasias in Eretz Yisrael was finally snuffed out in 425, which is pretty late. I didn't know it was that late. Was the beginning of the ambition of the Rosh Hashanah for greatness. So it says Nasi in the Jewish country of origin, even though he didn't have a lot of
Mhm.
authority, that curtailed the ambitions of the Rosh Hashanah involved. Also, he said Bustenai, who was first Rosh Hashanah in the Islamic period, who laid down the foundation for a machlokes which happened after his death, that he somehow also consolidated the power. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Basically says because then it goes into how much the Rosh Galusa had, how much power. So it's ironic because they moved to Sura because of Rav Ashi and Rav Ashi's control over them. But then, I guess after Rav Ashi's death, they regained control, and they sometimes were very difficult to the rabbis.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
Uh, uh, says Vasa Dilana and our forefathers, the Yeshiva Gaon's forefathers, the Beni Siainu. They came from the uh, even though they came from the house of Reish Galusa. They forsook all these ways of the Rosh Galusa. Bishton in the Sius, the negative manners of the Sius. Vale Berabanan the Mesivta, and they went among the rabbis of the yeshiva. And they desired modesty, humility, and lowness. We don't come from Bustenai, who was the Reishei Galusa at the time of the beginning of the Islamic period. And Makami Achi Ilus Kineda Beraban Masifta before that, we the rab we entered into the
Some
into
rabbinic families.
yeah. So there is a very fast, very important. Bustenai is an ancestor of almost all the royalty in the world, and all the royalty in the world therefore is related to us Jews because they come from Bustenai. So it's a story here which is brought down in both the. I don't know if you want to. It's a long story. If you want to do it now, you want to leave it for next time. It's in paid Reish Zion in the footnote, and also there's additional amounts here in the uh, in the screen text. So it's late for you.
Um, yeah, we can do that. You want to start with Rabinowitz?
Yeah. Bustenai, there's a famous book by Marcus Lehman. Marcus Lehman wrote very popular books for for German Jewish youth in the 1800s, and they were all translated into English and put out by Lubavitch in the 1950s and 60s. I don't know if kids read them nowadays. When I grew up, I read all of them, and they were very good novelettes. They were historical fiction, and he wrote up this whole story of Bustenai in his book on Bustenai. And it's hard to tell what's historical and what's not historical. So he brings down the whole legend here. Bustenai Rosh Gola reached him Bavel. He was the first Rosh Gola Kibush Aravi after the Arabian conquest. Bisfir 637. Fiagada, based on legend, crossed Sof Shultan passing Bavel towards the end of the Persian rule in Bavel, which is pagan. The king decreed to kill all the descendants of the house of David. בכללו המקרידם חנינוי, Reish Galusa, Reishei Galusa. She started to Etzah Berion, whose wife was then pregnant. Akach, then Cholam HaMelech, the king was dreaming. Kores Ate Pri Bepardes. He was cutting down trees in a orchard. Bustan Beparsis. A bustan in Persian is a orchard. Nation speaking close to Eitzah Charon, before he cut down the last tree. Near Lava Damza came Mechubad, with Tafach Mitzvah, an elderly and distinguished person appeared in his dream and hit him on the forehead. Piat Sas Mishra based on the counsel of his servants, Bikesh Hamelech Chacham Yehudi, the king asked a Jewish sage, Lagilo special to tell him the resolution of the dream. HaChacham, the Chacham Shechosno Shel Haninoi, who was the father of Haninoi, Pasar Sheisha Kenu Doya David HaMelech. He interpreted that the elder was David, who wanted to stop the eradication of his descendants. He invited the widow of Chainoi to confront him, and he promised to supply her needs. When she gave birth, Bustenai. The name was called Bustenai, in commemorating the king. Bustenai grew up both in astonished all the people there with his wisdom. He could point him to the Rosh Gola for the joy of all the Jews. After the Arabs conquered Bavel, Isher HaKhalif Omar, the Khalif Omar confirmed Bustenai's Rosh Gola, and gave one of the captive daughters of the king of Persia as his wife. And she gave birth to 3 sons. And he was the head of Rosh Gola during the Arab period. In order to remove some of the machlokes as to whether the descendants of the children of the Persian wife were legitimate, based David. He says, I'm from the house of David, but I'm not from the descendants of Bustenai.
Mhm.
And in the printed text, it says, Bustenai Yamin and Sim. I mean, as the screen text. Made Sam of the Rabbanan. Different angle of the story, right? It was in the Sim, goes live to the prophets of the rabbis. It was not from that family. Olive Nation minus Bustenai Reishei Galusa for our Pir Shov Shem Shira Go Mi Mishpachas and Sim Boshu Atzvam B'Yeshiva Limoter Chachomim. Shomrim, here gives the other part of the story. Kishnitzech Omar ben Al Katab Melech HaYishmaelim Es Yazdigader Melech Paras Nasan Omar as Bas Yazdigader Bustenai Reishei gave the daughter of Exilarch to wife, Iggeres. Okay, he was according to Susan McGuire. V'yazam Menakama Banim, and she gave birth to several children. V'chami Itil Sefek Yerusa. V'chami were not sure about the game. Shem Aloni's Gaira, Karoi. Maybe she wasn't Megayer properly. V'loki blood das Yudis. Well, now Goyim. People Matzien Rav Gaon. So for this reason, Rav Gaon is telling us that his family, Einam said Bustenai, they're not from the descendants of Bustenai, and the lake of Busfeko cloud, and people should not be masubic about him, that he is from that wicked or that controversial uh, lineage. So just give me a second here. Uh, Bustenai. So according to Geni.com, Bustenai is my 40th great grandfather.
Cool.
So everybody, I'm telling you, all the through Bustenai. Listen, once you have 40th great grandfather, all Jews are descended from him. The question is just how. That's all of that is like that. All Jews are descended from Rashi. All Ashkenazi Jews, at least, are descended from Rashi. The question is just how we're descended from Rashi. So, but all these things, so in any event, but all the, it's because he had all. Bustenai was a very powerful person, and he had his Persian wife, and were related to all the kings and queens of all of the world through Bustenai. So he was a very controversial fellow. According to a guy that I may remember it, also there was in the dream, the king was bitten on the forehead by a bee, was stung by a bee. And therefore, the coat of arms of the Reishei Galusa from that time had a bee on it in a commemoration of that dream.
Okay.
Anyway, so okay, so the he says that we are not part of this, and then he's going to get into I guess the badness of the Rav Ashi Galusa till now afterwards. So we'll stop here at Yud. Okay. Have a great week.
You too. Take
Next
care.
Sunday we're off. Shavuos.
Um, right. That's Lil Shavuos here.
Yeah. So
Okay.
either we'll learn during the week or we'll skip the week. We'll figure it out. Okay.
Okay. Shkach.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.